Variant standard title after the helpless moment with Lynn, English translation. After that helpless moment with Lynn, I spent the entire night tossing and turning. My brain, so used to analyzing spreadsheets and complex business strategies, immediately switched into training plan mode. If you're going to change, change big, that old perfectionist voice echoed. I almost went on Google to search for 6-day gym plan for beginners or strict keto diet. I began to picture myself waking up at 5 a.m., running 10 kilometers, and eating nothing but chicken breast and boiled vegetables. But then I remembered all my past failures. 5 years ago, I bought a VIP gym membership, worked out enthusiastically for 3 days, and then quit because I was sore and exhausted. 2 years ago, I tried a body detox diet. The result was that I was so hungry, I snapped at everyone and ended up binge eating twice as much afterward. I realized an important truth. The problem wasn't a lack of motivation, it was a lack of sustainability. I always set goals that were too high, turning change into punishment instead of a lifestyle. In that case, failure was inevitable. I looked at the old pair of sneakers on the floor and decided, this time must be different. Failure prevention strategy, I needed a commitment small enough not to trigger psychological resistance. Something I could stick to even when it rained, when I was stressed, or when I'd slept only 4 hours. I wrote a note to myself in big letters, 30 minutes, every day, anything. It wasn't a random number. I did some quick research, mostly skimming through scientific articles for 10 minutes, and learned that 30 minutes is the minimum daily recommendation to reduce cardiovascular risk. 30 minutes is long enough to raise your heart rate and release endorphins, but short enough not to cause the exhaustion that makes you quit the next day. 30 minutes is about the same amount of time I usually spend mindlessly scrolling on my phone or watching ads during a movie. My rules were simple. It doesn't matter what it is, walking, yoga, on a mat, even dancing around the room, just move your body. No pressure about intensity. If I'm tired, I'll walk slowly. If I feel good, I'll walk fast. Consistency matters more than intensity. Fixed time. After dinner, around 7:30 p.m., I'll habit stack, right after washing the dishes. Physical preparation. The first victory. Even though my commitment was minimal, I still needed to prepare to remove obstacles. I rummaged through my closet and found my old workout clothes, a pair of running pants and a breathable t-shirt. I washed them immediately. That small act was a silent declaration to myself. More importantly, I prepared for my first workout, brisk walking. I opened Google Maps and mapped out a loop around my neighborhood. The route was about 2.5 kilometers, which I estimated would take roughly 28 to 30 minutes. I even placed my sneakers right by the bedroom door so they'd be the first thing I'd see in the evening. That's the environment design technique, making it as easy as possible to start, eliminating the delay of looking for gear. Monday night, the inner dialogue. Monday night arrived, 7:15 p.m. I finished doing the dishes. My body began to react, the familiar heaviness, the lazy resistance. Lazy voice. It's kind of cold, go tomorrow. You'll feel better then. Doesn't matter if it's cold or hot, it's just 30 minutes, put on a jacket. Oh, there's that important work message to check. You should deal with that first. Committed voice. In 30 minutes, the world won't collapse. These 30 minutes are yours. It was a constant battle, but this time I had a weapon. Simplicity. I didn't need to overpower the lazy voice with sheer willpower. I just had to follow the 30-minute rule I'd set. I put on my shoes, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The clock on my phone read 7:30 p.m. The timer started 30. It wasn't a heroic moment. It was just a tired step across the threshold, but it was the hardest and most important step of the entire journey. Writing variant equals standard, title The First Week of Change, English translation, ID 4832. I started walking. The first 5 minutes passed relatively easily. I felt a little nervous, as if I were about to do something important. However, by the 8th minute, my lungs began to protest violently. I was used to shallow breathing, and having to take deep, steady breaths to supply oxygen to my working muscles felt torturous. I slowed down from a brisk walk to a normal pace, then almost to a shuffle. I checked my watch, 12:45. Turns out I hadn't even covered a third of the route. Lazy voice. "You can't do this. Turn back. Maybe you should start with just 10 minutes." I almost gave in, but then I remembered my rule. No pressure, but finish the 30 minutes. I told myself, "You don't have to run. Just keep walking. Even if you're the slowest walker in the world, you're still walking." I forced myself to focus on the small things, the sound of my footsteps, the glow of the streetlights, and the painful rhythm of my breathing. Eventually, I finished the route. When I got home, my timer read 30:15. I was utterly exhausted, but strangely, I also felt a small, quiet joy. I had kept a promise to myself. Days 2 and 3, the workout flu syndrome. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Every muscle I didn't know existed was screaming. I was suffering from delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. Getting out of the house on Monday night had been hard. Doing it again on Tuesday night was pure psychological torture. I used a new strategy, the 5-second rule. I counted down from 5, and as soon as I hit 1, I put on my shoes, giving my brain no time to analyze or come up with excuses. That day's 30 minutes were brutal. I had to stop 3 times to stretch my stiff muscles. I walked even slower than the first day. But when I got home, I drew a big X on my calendar. 2 consecutive days. Consistency was beginning to take shape. Days 4, 5, 6, 7. The first victory. By Wednesday, the soreness eased a little. By Thursday, I realized that while it still wasn't easy, it was no longer a life or death battle either. By the weekend, I noticed something astonishing. I was actually looking forward to those 30 minutes. It wasn't the workout itself I anticipated, it was the mental break. Those 30 minutes were the only time of day when I completely disconnected from emails, meetings, and financial worries. For the first time in years, I had a quiet moment, free from digital noise. Those 30 minutes of walking didn't just train my body, they began to transform into my moving meditation. On Sunday night, when I finished my 7th consecutive 30-minute walk, I didn't just feel tired. I felt powerful. I had proven to myself that I could keep this small promise. I had started building antibodies against the lazy voice. Writing variant standard. Title Month 2, The Brain Cleansing Effect. English translation ID equals 48323. After surviving the painful week, I entered the second month with a completely different feeling. The muscle soreness was still there, but it had transformed from torture into an acceptable echo of effort. The biggest change wasn't in my legs, it was in my brain. Before, when I walked into the bathroom in the morning, a thick fog seemed to cover my thoughts. It took 3 cups of coffee and half an hour of aimless scrolling through social media for my brain to start functioning. At the office, my focus was fragmented. I often had to reread an email 3 times before understanding its point. I called it office brain fog, a state of chronic mental fatigue. But now, after 30 minutes of walking every evening, something subtle was changing. When I woke up, the fog didn't vanish completely, but it had thinned considerably. I began to feel alert much faster. I started digging into what was actually happening during those 30 minutes of exercise. It wasn't just about burning calories, it was a chemical reaction in the brain. The brain cleansing mechanism. 30 minutes of light aerobic activity, like brisk walking, triggers a series of biochemical responses. Endorphin release, the body's natural painkiller. It produces a mild sense of euphoria, familiar to regular exercisers, but to me, it felt like a natural, legal, anti-stress drug. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is brain fertilizer. 30 minutes of walking boosts BDNF production, encouraging the growth of new neurons and strengthening existing connections. In other words, I was getting slightly smarter just by putting on my shoes. Increased blood flow. Blood carries oxygen and nutrients to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, problem solving, and decision making. I began calling those 30 minutes my brain shower. When I left the house, my mind was cluttered with worries and unfinished to-do lists. When I returned, everything seemed sorted out, the impurities filtered away. Discovering the second brain. My walking time had become more than physical training. It had turned into my personal strategy room. At work, solving a complex problem usually meant sitting down, folding my arms, and trying to force ideas to appear. That rarely worked. Now, my toughest problems often resolved themselves naturally while I was walking. For example, we had a marketing campaign stuck for 2 weeks. I had tried to find a new angle during multiple meetings. Nothing worked. But one evening, around the 15th minute of my walk, when my breathing and steps fell into rhythm, an idea suddenly appeared. Instead of focusing on product features, highlight the emotion it evokes. I stopped immediately, pulled out my phone, rule only for recording ideas, not scrolling, and captured it. The next day, I presented it in the meeting. It became the cornerstone of a successful campaign. I realized that when the body moves, the brain is freed from mechanical control and allowed to wander. This liberation creates space for new neural connections and insights that office stress usually blocks. Those 30 minutes had become my second brain, a place to process complex data, filter noise, and generate creativity. The change in body language. One of the most interesting transformations was how I carried myself. I had always been the guy hunched over a screen, shoulders slumped, back curved, a posture that silently broadcast exhaustion and insecurity. Regular walking strengthened my weak core muscles. I began to stand taller, naturally without trying. One day, an older colleague I rarely spoke with turned to me in the elevator and said, "Nam, you look different. You seem more radiant." It was a simple word, but it encapsulated the entire transformation. No more office fatigue. No more brain fog. No more feeling crushed under pressure. 30 minutes a day had taught me that mental and physical health aren't separate domains. They're two sides of the same coin. By moving my body, I had created quiet and clarity in my mind. And when the mind is calm, irritability and tension slowly give way to focus and a renewed confidence. This lifestyle didn't just make me feel healthier, it made me a better problem solver and a more pleasant colleague. I had begun to master my emotions instead of letting them master me.